And welcome to Connects Live. I'm Mark Michelson, and today we have guest Jonathan Hawkins from Anthrolytics. And Jonathan is a enthusiast around digital empathy as well as an entrepreneur in that space, dealing with technology and tools to help us not only gather up and understand digital empathy, but what to do with it when we have it. So, welcome, Jonathan. I appreciate you joining in, and you're in England, as I understand.
I am indeed. And thanks for the invitation, Mark. It's great to be here and great to meet you all. So, based out of England, and as you say, something of a campaigner in the world of trying to make it, consumers' lives a little better, I guess, is our overall mission.
Excellent. So how'd you get started in this? I'm kind of curious, when did you realize that this was your calling and your path?
Yeah, so I think I've been in the CX space broadly for probably 25 years, Mark, right? I started off in the sort of contact center world, so the customer experience at the point of interaction, how do you improve that? And then latterly, probably about 10 years ago, moved to a company called Satmetrics, who I think people know primarily as co-creators of the Net Promoter Score, and I was on the exec team there. And of course, I got a very, very good view in terms of, how people were measuring CX, general CX programs, and the good, the bad, and the ugly of them. We obviously went through a lot of organizations, a lot of companies there. We then sold that, and subsequently I set up another company in the machine learning space, really focused on B2B CX. This was prior to Anthrolytics. And I think that was interesting because what we were trying to do was figure out, look, how do you make the data in CX programs better in the B2B world? And then latterly, probably beginning part of this year, I know one of my co-founders I'd known for several years, but we started talking around emotion and how emotion impacted decisions and behaviors. And Peter had built out done an awful lot of work in the space of being able to predict people's behaviors, which subsequently led to Anthrolytics being born. And I think really the primary reason that it really interested me now was because if we think about, obviously, look, we've all been through a pandemic, right? We've lived through something that no generation before us, or certainly in living memory, has gone through. But that's been compounded with a lot of sort of socio-political events, big divides, socially, politically. And I think what that's led to is a change in the way consumers think about the types of companies they want to do business with. And they're starting to look for organizations who really support the ecosystem of their stakeholders rather than just support the shareholder. And so what that's led to is, in the consumer's eyes, really what they're looking for is being treated empathetically by companies. So rather than just hyper-personalization of, look, well, Jonathan bought this, so therefore he's probably likely to buy that, or most consumers go through this journey, so therefore that means they're going to buy more. They want organizations to now understand them. And some of the data around this and the research is quite staggering. I think it's something like 87% of consumers say that empathy is the biggest driver of loyalty now. And so taking that into account, the question is, well, how do you deal empathetically with somebody when you've had to, by everything that we've been through, rush to digital, right? And by rushing to digital and operational efficiency, what we've actually done is engineered ourselves out of the relationship with the customer in many instances. There's also another side to that, which is that organizations are very, very focused on removing friction, improving operational efficiency. But you think about any commoditized marketplace, Mark, and take a telco as an example. I can go to 6 telcos over here, or you can in the US, who will all have absolute parity of operational excellence. And so that ceases to become a differentiator. And so the question now is, right, well, how do we differentiate? And the way that you differentiate is being able to understand the emotions that every customer has, where are they today, and treat them appropriately. So why would I try and sell to you if you're angry? Why would I try and sell to you if you're completely ambivalent? And so what we seek to do is provide this sort of predictive capability, which allows organizations to understand what is the emotional state of every person on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. what is the likely next behavior that they're going to take, buy more, buy less, churn, and how do we support organizations to put empathetic programs in place to ensure they get the right message to the right person at the right time. So if I'm surprised and delighted, send me a marketing message by all means. If I'm angry, please don't try and sell to me, right? Acknowledge that I'm angry, all right, and do something about it. And so that's the type of insights that we're trying to give to customers, trying to make the world, as I say, broadly a better place, but actually one that delivers great results for organizations, you know, because we can now link event to emotion to behavior, that has a direct link to financial outcome. And so rather now than having this sort of woolly connection, you have a direct link between the experiences you're giving to a customer and the financial outcome that that's going to deliver. So
I've done a little bit of work in emotional and behavior work.
Yeah.
You know, things come to mind, of course, of Syncytium, if you're familiar with that. It's a way of mapping emotions
Yeah.
in a qualitative and quantitative sense. And a lot of it's based in, you know, psychology, but essentially there's extremes on different dimensions: social, how I view myself, how I view others, you know, et cetera. And so I'm kind of curious, how does one start to measure and understand digital empathy, and how does that how do you even come to measure it in order to
Yeah. It's magic, Mark. It's
yes.
no. No, it's look, it's the combination of you know, behavioral science and data science coming together, and of course probably until the last few years, the sort of technical capabilities from sort of machine learning and AI perspective have not really been there to enable us to do this kind of stuff. And so there's there's obviously a big timing component to it. But really, as with most models, what you're really doing is you're taking a bunch of calibration data. And that calibration data in this instance would be verbatims from customers. Okay, so they could be survey responses, they could be transcriptions of calls from a contact center, it could be emails, support desk tickets, so on and so forth. The important thing is that that transcription is linked to an event, or that verbatim is linked to an event, and also obviously linked to a customer. So now what you're able to do is ascertain the emotional response to an event. And so now you can start looking at an event or sequence of events and build models that say, okay, well, we now know from operational data, i.e. the transactional data and the data exhaust as a customer interacts with you, we can now say, okay, well, Mark has experienced this. We don't need to survey Mark because we know, based on the models and the emotional personae that we've built, the people who have experienced this, who are like Mark, fall into a cohort of people who have a likely emotional response to that event. And that cohort that has that likely emotional response then goes on to exhibit this type of behavior. And so now you're in a position whereby you can now predict emotion and behavior for every customer based on the data exhaust they leave behind when interacting with you.
So that I see that happening, you know, if you have a chat session online, so to say, right? Or if you're making a review of something, perhaps.
Correct.
But how does it happen in real time in like a call center?
So and there are two. Let me separate this, Mark, because there are two different things here. We don't do that. Okay, so there are lots of products which do that. So really, what they're doing is they're doing, if you like, the first part of what we do. Okay, they are transcribing a communication and they're applying an emotional algorithm over the top. So that'll be the first part of what they do. And frankly, there are lots of platforms which do that. A lot of the NLP, NLU platforms will do that. I think what we do is, which is different, is we extend that out to everybody who hasn't communicated with you. Okay, so what I always like to say is, look, from a survey, from a contact center, you're likely to get, let's say, 5% of customers who are going to contact you. All right, and they're typically either very angry or very happy. Yeah, nobody rings up a contact center to go, hey, I just want to let you know you're doing okay. Right, you've typically got a problem. All right, you typically, the people who respond to surveys, there's typically quite a high degree of bias within that. All right, what we're seeking to do is predict that for the other 95% of people who never contact you but are interacting with your business. And so there are a bunch of great technologies, and we certainly use that to run the emotional understanding to start with to build these emotional personae, but then we have a series of algorithms which now use that to predict for everybody else who doesn't contact you.
So predicting that out to the emotions and predicting behavior.
Yeah.
Kind of curious how we do that. How do we actually know what people will do and why?
Well, and look, it's all based on algorithms, Mark, obviously, and I would argue that you can't, right? Which sounds counterintuitive for me to say. What I can do is I can put people into cohorts of likely emotion and likely behavior. Now, there are companies, and I think IBM have tried this, of saying, right, what I want to do is I want to predict Mark's emotion completely, right? And they use kind of 300 different emotions and run sort of 5-year programs to try and predict what is Mark feeling at this exact point, which is great if you happen to have 5 years and $10 million to predict what you're feeling, right? But with the best will in the world,
Like
what
the
are you
Truman
gonna,
Show at that point.
yeah, exactly right. But the reality is, what are you going to do with a segment of one? All right, it's impossible to action and run at scale. We have frankly sacrificed individual accuracy to predict. We do obviously apply a score to every individual, but the idea being that we can now put them into a cohort of similar people. Okay, so we're now enhancing segmentation. Take just a real example of a retail bank where we did this. So really what we were doing is we were taking the existing segmentation that bank had, applying emotional predictions across 60 million people, and then putting that prediction back in to the system of record of engagement so that they can enhance the segmentation model. So let's say in segment A, rather than send a sales message to everybody in segment A, which is typically what they would have done, what you now do is say, okay, in segment A, I've got people who are, as an example, receptive to buy. So I'm now going to market to those people. And I'm going to look across my other segments and pull in those other people who are receptive to buying. And I'm going to send all of those people the sales message. Interestingly, when we did that and did some A/B testing, the marketing yield, the results in revenue that they got increased by 17% by only marketing to people who were receptive. Not rocket science, but incredibly hard to do, right? I mean,
it's send a message to people who respond. Yeah, my
right. I mean, it just sounds so simple when you think about it, but nobody's done it before, right? And that's what we do, right? And those people who are what we would, sadness is a really interesting emotion, right? Because typically these are people who would like to be loyal to you, but can't for whatever reason. Okay, either your systems aren't allowing them to. We're doing a project with a telco where they've got a bunch of people who are classified as sad, but the reason for that is they actually want to buy more, but they're finding it very hard to navigate their way through the buying process.
I feel that about my telco as well. I'm very sad.
All right. So you've now got this group of people who want to buy, all right, but actually they're hitting a brick wall and they can't. So now what do we do with those people? We're not going to send them a message going, hey, buy something. What we're going to do is we're going to send them a message going, look, we know you've got an issue with trying to buy something, so let's solve your problem for you. And you do two things then. One, you engender great degree of loyalty because you've recognized where they are, you've understood where they are, you've solved their problem, but you've also gained revenue at the same time.
It seems fairly simple, but it's also very detailed at a small level of data management.
Correct.
So your systems, as I understand it, are able to take a fire hose of data, oceans of data, and sift through it, and then pinpoint some individual or classify them into either, as you call it, cohorts or straw men, right?
Yep.
And then sort of tailor your messaging to that. How does it happen in real time? It seems like it's a
So I mean, and the reality is, Mark, I don't think people want to do this in real time, right? You can run this overnight. Because the reality is, why would I want to? I'm not going to tailor marketing messages to somebody on the fly. Okay, now absolutely you can do that, right? I've never seen it work work effectively in the real world, right? I think there's a lot of technology that says you can do it. I think most companies find it incredibly hard to do. We're dealing with some very large organizations, and the reality is, are they going to be able to send you that data in real time as you to flip on a prediction? Now, the reality is we could do it in real time because actually the algorithms run very, very quickly, and it's honestly question, Mark, it's a question of horsepower inside of the platform. So you could do it. We've not seen an application today where anyone's wanted to do it. All right, so typical applications for this have been, right, how do I streamline my marketing? I need to optimize my marketing spend. How do I do that? How do I optimize my customer journey? Because of course, if you think about what I said at the beginning, what we're actually doing is we're predicting the emotional response to an event or sequence of events. And so this is information that you can now use to optimize your customer journeys. So yeah.
It's a little bit kind of reminds me of some of when I saw The Social Dilemma. I don't know if you saw that show.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of that, where you have a straw man and you interact back to that straw man based on what they do, which is kind of like into your own bubble kind of thing. But how do you come out of that bubble?
Well, let me. Well, I'd also just like saying reference to The Social Dilemma. We do this ethically, Mark.
You're conscious of it, right? That's good.
Yeah. There is a gentleman on this call who is, our chief anthropologist, who ensures that everything that is done ethically. With the right goals in mind. But I think really what we're trying to do here is give consumers more choice and stop the irritation, right? Because and the marketing example is very, very simple, right? Why do I want to irritate somebody, and why do I want to waste my resources sending them a message that is not appropriate? Equally, we're talking to a couple of companies about how do they build this into their contact center routing. And so if you think about what we do, Mark, we take data in, we transform it, and we push it back out to systems of record of engagement. So what we can do is push that into a customer data platform or a CRM as an example. So now as you contact a contact center, you're able to, given there is sufficient capability in the contact center routing, you're able to now route the call. So if I know that Mark's angry, I'm going to route Mark to an empathetic agent. If I know that Jonathan is receptive to a sale, I'm going to push Jonathan to a sales agent. So you can start to get very, very cute about how you use this data. And I think you're absolutely right. The joy of it is it sounds so easy to do. I just want to assure you it's really not. I think we have more PhDs in our company than I've seen anywhere else that I've worked. But the concept is beautifully simple, right? And why wouldn't you want to do this? And this is why I'm such a fan of it, Mark, because I look at it as a consumer myself and think, well, look, I don't want somebody to send me a marketing message when I don't want it, right? I want to be routed to the right person. I want the journeys that I'm taken through to recognize the behavior it's going to engender. And I would also go as far as say we're building out an employee side to the business as well, because now think of it like this: if we can predict an emotional response to an event of a human being, now think about how do we optimize employee experiences to drive the right emotions, which then drive the right behaviors, which will then subsequently drive the right behaviors, emotions, and outcomes in our customer base. So you now start to get this very, very solid link between how I treat my employees right the way through to customer outcomes, which, as all of us we've been around CX for a long time, right? And that is the piece that generally eludes everybody. How do you tie employee experience right the way from onboarding and the employee life cycle through to customer outcomes? And we believe we have a way of doing that.
Excellent. And it's fascinating. I love this. We do have some guests with some questions. So I want to get into the Q&A here a little bit. Cecilia.
That always worries me because there's going to be a bunch here I won't be able to answer. Yeah.
Cecilia, welcome.
So be kind, Cecilia. Be kind. Yeah.
Well, Mark, you already actually raised part of the question that I was asking, which is how do you build in to your algorithms the different cultural tendencies or propensities, the gender differences, things like that, because what makes one person happy will piss off somebody else.
Absolutely, Cecilia, absolutely. And that's exactly why we build the emotional personae for each company as right at the outset. So we have a series of algorithms which are what I would call stock. So the easy way to think about it is, look, 70% is stock, okay? And then for each company / region, and obviously we do this, in as areas as diverse. I mean, currently we've got projects ongoing in Nairobi, Auckland and New Zealand, and the US and Ireland. So, just some of the places we're doing business today, which, and they all have extreme cultural differences, right? Not only regional cultural, but economically different, economic differences. I mean, just vast differences. So we have a kind of, let's say 70%, which is stock. And then we take the data from each company to build the emotional personae based on your customers. Okay, so the way that we do it is we don't seek to try and build that in at the outset. We seek to build self-learning algorithms which take your customers in your regions, which we can now link, as I say, the emotion of your customers to your events and their subsequent behavior. And that then starts a self-learning process within the algorithms that improves over time. And of course, the longer we do this, and all of this, I think it's also important to say that from our perspective, we only have anonymized data. We don't care to, well, we certainly don't want to know, I would go so far as that, that it's Cecilia that we're running through the algorithm. Okay, we just want to know that it's customer ABC1, right? We don't want anything to do. But the virtue of that is that, of course, the data that we have is anonymized in the platform. The platform is obviously self-learning. And so as the data and the pool of data increases, based on certain verticals, it improves and improves and improves. So that 70% that we talk about today, maybe 80% in the future, because we can now say, okay, well, you're in Nairobi, you're a telco, blah, blah, blah. And so it goes on, and we can start standardizing those models a lot more. But of course, this is new technology, as I'm sure everybody knows. This is not, whilst obviously we've been thinking about this and working on this for a number of years, it's only gone to market this year because, as Mark says, it is really simple when you talk about it, and it sounds like it's so easy to do and everyone should be doing it. It's so hard. I can't even tell you how hard it is to do in the background to make it accurate.
But I still want to press you a little bit, Jonathan, because
Sure.
the cultural of geographic is a little different than the sort of ethnicity and gender and those.
Yeah, and I agree, Cecilia, and I think very much that depends on the data that we can get from companies.
Okay.
All right, and so we are entirely reliant on what's given to us. So let me give you two examples, right? One example would be an organization has a lot of psychographic, demographic information they can give us on our sample customer base. And if we have that information, now we can start saying, okay, well, this is gender, this is ethnicity, and we can build models that take that into account. Now, very often companies don't have that. I mean, you would like to think that they do, but they very often don't. And so if we don't have a marker that we can build the personae around, it has to be left out of the algorithm. So and that's probably the simplest way to say it. If I have it, I can model it. If I don't have it, I can't build it into the predictions. So does that answer the question? It's not because I can't. Yeah.
So you are asking the questions of your client company.
Yes.
To see if they can drill down to those kinds
Absolutely.
of graphics,
Yeah.
and then taking into consideration, because one of the issues with the movie that you talked about, there's another movie that came out that deals with the fact that the AI is very narrow-minded. And
okay, completely. Yeah, no, and I read those articles. I didn't see the movie, but I read the articles, and and it had a very distinct bias. So I just want to say, to put everyone's mind at rest, we're not that. We don't, we don't. If we are given information, we can model based on any parameter that we're given, right? The reality is, Cecilia, that we've actually yet to come across an organization that can or would give us that information. And I think potentially, and this is a whole really big ethical question of, because it's new and because it's modeling and because there are media stories and of course the social dilemma that Mark mentioned, all of these things, people are very wary of them. And so I think people are taking it step by step. And I think rightly so, frankly, Cecilia. I think rightly so. You know, because I say the basis of what we're doing is we want to be seen as the ethical player in this space as much as anything. And our objective is to make choice and experience better for the consumer, not that we want to try and do, I don't know, change people's minds on a bunch of things. Like, you know, we're not Cambridge Analytica. We're not trying to sway an election or something like that. You know, we're simply here to say, right, what's Cecilia going to appreciate when we send her a message?
Proper golden rule going to the platinum rule. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Give me what I want, not what you think I want.
Correct. And that's exactly what we want to try and do.
Well, thank you so much for that, Cecilia. We have a couple more questions, and so let's bring Susan up. Hi, Susan. You there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Sorry for the lack of video, but I'm sitting under a stairwell in a company with my headphones on, trying to have conversation here today. Not pretty. Anyway, I think I'm a little confused, but maybe I'm not. So the reason my question kind of falls into this new sort of evolving category called customer success. And there's a lot of definitions of it as to which side of the fence you might be sitting on, whether you're being supported or put into this category by the sales side of the house or by the service side of the house.
Yeah.
I understand what you said here today, but I'm still struggling with if customer success is a combination of revenue from the existing customer base, better service and support. How do you apply this in maybe through the customer success team to a first line group of people, such as your service group or your support group, in their efforts to handle calls, apply this behavioral and emotional activity to really reap the benefit of more results and better engagement on all levels? I'm a little confused.
Okay, no, and I think it's a perfectly valid question, Susan, because I've been talking obviously about B2C more than I have customer success. Now, part of my role used to be running a customer success organization, so I understand a lot of the challenges that go on in that world. So how would I see this apply to customer success? And I think there's a couple of ways that I would see it being run. I think one is if we look at the individual customer success manager. You know, typically what you see, or certainly what I saw, so let me just speak from my experience, and I can't speak for every customer success organization, obviously, but you know, you tend to see in customer success a lot of customer success managers dealing with the people that they get on with, right, rather than the people that they should necessarily be speaking to, i.e. those people who are either disengaged with your organization or who are deemed to be angry with the organization, because ultimately, you know, they are the people who will have a negative impact on your churn looking forwards. And so if we look at it in its simplest form, and you think about what I was saying about transforming data, we would take data, we would make predictions, we would put that back into your CRM, your customer success platform, Gainsight, or something similar, which would give an additional piece of information that your customer success managers could work with. Now, when you start thinking about, and it was interesting, I was having a conversation with a big tech company about how they would apply this, particularly in relation to call routing for support desks. And sorry, excuse me. One of the things that they were saying to me, which was very interesting, was, look, if we know that Susan is delighted with us, actually we would feel very happy pushing Susan down a self-serve route. Whereas if we know that Jonathan is angry, then actually we probably want to push Jonathan to an agent, okay, because we want that human interaction, we want to deal with it and have a kind of first time resolution. So there's some pretty tactical things you could use it for in that world. And I think when you start thinking about, look, how do I transform my operation to drive, you know, ultimately churn improvements, which really is what a customer success organization is there to do, is drive revenue and minimize churn. It's really understanding, right, what are the moments that matter along that journey? Because again, if you think about the fact that we're predicting an emotional response to an event or sequence of events, it always goes back to that customer journey of, right, how do I use those insights to improve certain touch points along my customer journey to drive the right level of emotion and events and behaviors. Does that answer the question, Susan?
It does. Excuse me. I guess the second part of this is, how do you enter an organization to sell or your product / service? Where do you go? Where's the starting point? Are you identifying a specific pain point, or are you addressing an overall concept to an organization?
I think for us, when we're going to market, I think that's a pretty broad go-to-market question there, Susan. but I think from
not known to be shy.
Yeah. But let me see if I can answer that quite succinctly, because it's a kind of question I could probably talk to you about for hours. But I think it's use case specific, and I think the areas where we are speaking to organizations at the moment are obviously the marketing team. There is a great need, and there are people on this call I know who are far more expert in marketing than I am, but there is a very strong need in marketing organizations at the moment to deliver results and optimize the spend. And obviously a lot of spend in marketing teams has been reduced over the last 12-18 months, and so the question now is, how do we optimize our spend to drive superior results? So I think there's obviously a go-to-market strategy in marketing. There is also I think surprisingly to us, we're seeing a lot of people in the transformational side of business, and they're broadly classified as chief transformation officers, CX transformation, marketing transformation, and contact center transformation teams who are looking for new ways. And so, I think our sort of prerequisite is, look, it's a new type of solution. So is it somebody who is forward thinking? From that point of view, are they willing to look at something new? Are they involved in an area of the business which is interested in driving transformation, either as a specific department within a business or more broadly across the business? Because there are, as a couple of chief transformation officers that we're working with who are looking very broadly across the business and using this far more as an insights tool than a specific point tool. So yeah, very broad, but I would say at a high level, CX professionals, transformation, and I say we are speaking with a few people who are interested in customer success and sales transformation in terms of, how do I provide additional information to my teams, and of course, marketing.
We're almost out of time, unfortunately, but we do have a couple more questions. If we can keep it really short, I think we can get them in. Stephanie. Stephanie, you still there?
Right here. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you. Boy, enlightening. I have taken about 3 pages of rip-roaring notes. So empathy, just the biggest word of the year. And I'm wondering possibly how it felt a year and a half ago in its use as to where we are now, because a lot of people didn't really identify it with it maybe as a layperson.
Scott's question is very similar. So Scott, feel free to jump in here, and then we're going to go to networking shortly after.
Sure. Was Stephanie complete? Okay.
Well, yeah, it's similar. Yours is very similar. So you're talking about.
Yeah, Jonathan, I was thinking of my question when you were answering Cecilia's question, which is the AI is as good as the input from the humans that feed it initially. And I'm wondering, is there opportunity, and would you bother going back if you get a better profile, for example, of a certain type of persona? Is it worthwhile looking back 5 years or 2 months or whatever on what would the prediction have been with that better understood persona? And
it's a great question, Scott, and that's exactly what we do.
And with Stephanie's input as well for taking into account the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we do that, right? Because we find it very helpful in terms of building models. And I think partially to answer Stephanie's question, I'm not sure whether I am answering your question, Stephanie, but I'll try to in the middle of this, is that, of course, as the pandemic hit, everything changed, right? So any data you looked at over the last, if we went back 5 years as an example, Scott, right, I'm not sure how useful that would be. Typically what we're doing currently is we're looking back 6 months, because we kind of feel at the moment that 6 months is, people had a chance, it's like any kind of shock in life, right? You have this sort of shock, depression, you start working your way out of it. They always say the same thing with sort of redundancy and what have you. So I think going back 6 months, people had 9 months to kind of process what was happening. I think behavior started to become a little more normalized, certainly limited, but a little more normalized. And I think people were starting to look more to the future then, whereas certainly, if I just take my own example, last April, May, I'm just like, okay, the world's about to end. I'm just going to shut everything down. Somebody asked me if I'm going to buy anything. I'm like, you must be kidding, right? I'm going to batten down the hatches and I'm going nowhere and I'm spending no money because I have no idea what's going to come out of it. But I think, so we tend to look back 6 months because we kind of feel at the moment that is, it's kind of a good point of time. We are currently doing some work at the moment with somebody where we're looking back 2 years. So we haven't finished that analysis yet, Scott. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of what would have happened 2 years ago versus what would have happened 18 months ago, what would have happened 6 months ago. So that's going to be quite interesting because, of course, you do have that complete chain of data, right? You can run the algorithms and run the predictions and actually see what happened. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be, but actually, I think we're kicking off that analysis tomorrow morning, actually. So I'll give you a call in a couple of weeks and I'll let you know what the what happened with it.
Catch up.
Yeah, definitely. But I think Stephanie's trying to answer your question as well in terms of empathy. I think a lot of people were thinking about it before the pandemic started. It certainly accelerated, right? But I think there's this whole series of sort of very divisive politics across the world, socio-political events, and so I think there was this natural process that people were starting to think more and more empathetically, or wanting to be treated more empathetically. And I think, as with many things, a lot of things slowed down, but I think with the pandemic, that just accelerated wildly because you suddenly have this maelstrom of divisive politics, socio-political events, plus the pandemic. And I think people started to have a lot of different priorities. How do I want to do business, right? Do I just want to base my decision on, cost and convenience, or do I want to actually perhaps go to a bit more effort and do business with companies that do the right thing? And they're the types of companies that we want to do business with. People who want to do the right thing, who want to treat their employees and their customers empathetically, while still having an eye on the fact that we need to be a profitable business because we want to be here in 5 years' time, right? So we can't live in la la land and think that we can give everyone a big hug and spend without economic considerations. But I think it certainly accelerated, Stephanie. And I think now, as you say, it is the word on everybody's lips. And hopefully we've done a small thing that to try and give companies the opportunity to be empathetic at scale, because I think empathy in companies today has been based around training staff empathetically, trying to make managers more empathetic with their teams, but they've never been able to do it with customers until now. And so that's the gap that we're trying to fill.
Excellent. I hope that answered everyone's questions, at least for the moment. We are about 10 minutes behind time. I would like to close out. No problem. I'd just like to close up the video by saying we are going to go into networking now. And if you're watching this video, you're welcome to join us on any Wednesday at 1:30 Eastern time for Connects Live, where we have a fireside chat with an expert like Jonathan here. It's been fantastic today, as well as some networking time. Also, I'd like to inform everyone of our event coming up in Boston. The event is an in-person and online event scheduled for September 21. We're going to be running a survey on that very soon to figure out how people feel now about the new mask suggestions by the CDC and whether or not a meeting in person is still feasible. So with all that said, I'd like to close out the show. Thank you very much, Jonathan. You were fantastic. Very informative.
Thanks, much appreciate it.
We're going to carry on the chat in the networking session. So if you have any more questions, folks, feel free to jump on that. So Audrey, take us out.